How's it going, guys? It's Hobby from Mars 1000. Today is August 26, 2020, and today we're gonna primarily talk about Hurricane Laura, major Hurricane Laura, which is gonna make landfall in Louisiana probably between 12 to 18 hours from now, early Thursday morning, between late Wednesday. So right now, if we take a look at the composition, it's to a point where I pretty much don't need to explain how organized this is. You guys could probably tell for yourself that this is just almost a picture perfect hurricane. We see like a lot of convection all throughout the storm. We don't see a lot of wind shear that's disrupting it, and we're seeing a pretty well-defined eye at this point. It isn't the most well-defined eye ever just yet. However, it seems like the hurricane is definitely beginning to develop this eye and becoming more organized with the eye, which represents that this storm is definitely still strengthening and strengthening rapidly at that, as it's currently a 125 mile per hour storm. Because last night, well, yesterday, I think at around 5, as of the 5 o'clock advisory, it was only an 85 mile, no, it was a 90 mile per hour storm when it was around 8 o'clock yesterday. Now it's a 125 mile per hour monster at category 3 strength, and it's expected to continue to strengthen, because if we take a look at the wind shear map, it's still under fairly favorable conditions for hurricane development. There aren't a lot of upper level winds that'll divert a lot of that latent heat away from the center of circulation, or really deter the thunderstorm and the convection from the storm away from the center of circulation. So it's under very light wind shear for the most part, and it's over the extremely warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, as I'll show you right now. And not only warm, but it's warm with depth, as if you go hundreds of miles deep, the sea surface temperature, well, the water temperature is still at least above 80 degrees, even if you go 100 miles down into the ocean, which shows that this storm has a lot of latent heat to feed off of in the Gulf of Mexico, since the upper ocean heat content is very high in the Gulf of Mexico at this point. And that's unfortunate, because that's going to continue to rapidly develop this storm, and dry air is non-existent for the most part in this storm. And like I said, this is just a picture perfect hurricane all around. It looks extremely well organized, and it'll be a scary sight to see any hurricane come this close along the coast. And at this point, it seems inevitable that this will make landfall as a major hurricane, and likely a category 4 hurricane. And I wouldn't even rule out a category 5, as much as I hate to say it, because this storm is just rapidly intensifying, and it still has about 12 to 18 hours before it hits land to continue to develop. However, there are some factors that we could hope for that might slow this thing down, such as an eye wall replacement cycle, which definitely could occur over the next 12 to 18 hours. And also, there is a little bit of wind shear, mainly towards Louisiana and Texas. However, the GFS model is thinking that this wind shear won't be major enough to really slow it down much, and it won't be strong enough for the most part, as this ridge that's currently over the southeast United States is pushing it a little bit further up north, to the point where it won't have a major effect on the structure of this storm, which is unfortunate, because we definitely needed those upper level winds to maybe weaken this storm before it makes landfall. But it does seem like it's going to be the case, as this could very well be, and it's becoming likely that this will be a category 4 and maybe a category 5 before landfall. So that's definitely a huge worry for Louisiana and Texas. And I'd prepare now, because when we're talking about a category 4 hurricane and potentially a category 5 on your doorstep, that is life-threatening conditions, and you don't want to mess around with that. This isn't going to be another hurricane, another category 1, category 2 hurricane. This is category 4 and 5. That's almost as high as it gets, and it's very rare you see something as strong as this make landfall in the United States. The closest hurricanes that come to mind was Hurricane Michael, which did make landfall as a Category 5 back in October 2018 in the Panhandle of Florida, and we saw how much devastation that brought through Panama City and Mexico Beach, Florida, where entire communities were completely destroyed by Hurricane Michael and its Category 5 strength winds. And this could be borderline at that level. And what's also more worrisome with this storm is that this has a larger circulation than Hurricane Michael as well. Hurricane Michael was relatively small when it was making landfall as a Category 5 in the Panhandle of Florida, but this storm seems a little bit larger by the extra 100 miles, and that's worrying, not only because there's a larger wind field with this and a lot more people will get affected, but the storm surge will be a lot higher since the storm is a lot larger and stronger, as usually larger when hurricanes are larger in wind field, the storm surge is a lot bigger because pretty much the wind has a large area where it could pile up water and bring a lot of storm surge along the coast. Even though Katrina was only a Category 3 hurricane, it was so large that storm surge really felt like a Category 5 hurricane, and it was something that that completely devastated Mississippi and Louisiana, all throughout the Gulf Coast. And if we take a look at the current storm surge map, which is very scary at this point. Yesterday, the storm surge forecast was 9 to 13 feet, and I said that was completely dangerous. Like 9 to 13 feet. Imagine standing up and then you put your hand up 9 to 13 feet. That's how much flooding is possible in certain areas along the coast in Louisiana. But now the forecast is 15 to 20 feet. So even if you tried, even if you're like 7 foot or even 8 feet, even if you try to put your hand all the way up, you still can't reach the amount of storm surge that's currently forecast along the coast for Louisiana. 15 to 20 feet. That's just mind-blowing, guys. If like the closest I've seen to a storm surge like that was during Hurricane Katrina, where we saw that historic 28-foot storm surge in Mississippi. When we're talking 15 to 20 feet of storm surge possible, that's completely devastating. Obviously, it's this storm surge is more likely to impact the more lower population areas, more of the swampy areas of Louisiana. However, still a ton of flooding is expected through Lake Charles, where you could easily be under 10 feet of water in certain spots in the city of Lake Charles, and even going as far to the west as Texas. 10 to 15 feet is expected along the border of Texas, 6 to 9 around Galveston, and 2 to 4 in Galveston Bay. And then going further east, still 8 to 12 feet. That's still very damaging, even though this area will be very far from the eye. Well, I wouldn't say very far, but it's going to be ways away from the eye. 8 to 12 feet of storm surge is still something major. And then there's 4 to 7 feet towards southeastern Louisiana. And then we have 2 to 4 feet of storm surge right around New Orleans area. So the storm surge threat, I have to say, is going to be life-threatening throughout Louisiana. If you're along the coast, you definitely need to evacuate, because 15 to 20 feet of storm surge, like the National Hurricane stated, is unsurvivable. So you definitely need to evacuate if you're within those areas. And I would advise mandatory evacuations. I know I don't have any sort of power towards southeastern Louisiana, but if you want to save your life, that if you're along the coast, definitely evacuate that area, because I'm telling you guys, this is life-threatening storm surge. And the highest cause of death, like I keep saying in every video, I know, but I want to emphasize this point, that the highest cause of death in hurricanes is storm surge, and 15 to 20 feet of storm surge is like historic, and will pretty much be blowing past any type of storm surge records all throughout the Louisiana and maybe the Texas coast since maybe Hurricane Rita, which made landfall around 15 years ago. And this is expected to be worse than Rita, be stronger than Rita, and the storm surge is expected to be more than Rita. So definitely prepare along the coast when it comes to storm surge. And not only storm surge will be the main problem with this storm, because even if you go further inland, there's still going to be a heavy rain threat all throughout the southeast, and even going as far inland as Arkansas, where 6 to 10 inches is certainly possible around the Little Rock area, and that'll cause a lot of flooding, and a lot of flash flooding is likely all throughout these areas. So if I were to show you the flash flooding map, you could see that there's a pretty moderate risk of flash flooding all throughout Louisiana, Texas, Arkansas, and even going as far north as Missouri, the extreme southern portions of Illinois and Kentucky, as we're going to continue to see that rain spread all throughout the southeast coast, even as this storm continues to weaken as it goes along the coast. So now let's take a look at the forecast track of this, and you see that large wind field of Hurricane Laura, and it's expected to strengthen before it makes landfall into a Category 4. And by the way, it's currently at 125 miles per hour. It's moving at a relatively average speed for a tropical cyclone at 16 miles per hour to the northwest, and it's expected to make that turn into Louisiana later tonight. And it seems, and we seem pretty confident that this will make landfall somewhere between the border of Texas and Louisiana, close to where Hurricane Rita made landfall, as there isn't really much debate of where this will make landfall. However, like I said, like a shift just by a little bit, just by a couple miles, could make a major difference when it comes to the storm surge forecast with this, and also the impacts you make, and also the impacts you'll experience. However, for the most part, you should expect hurricane conditions from Galveston all the way to the middle portions, the middle coastal region of Louisiana, as it's pretty inevitable that you will experience hurricane impacts. And especially if you're close within the eye around the border of Louisiana and Texas, it's likely you're going to experience wind gusts over 120 miles per hour, and possibly wind gusts over 140 to 150 miles per hour. And when we're talking about wind gusts going up that high, you can't get much higher than that when it comes to a landfalling hurricane in the United States, as it's extremely rare to see a hurricane bring 140 to 150 mile per hour wind gusts in a region. But that's definitely becoming possible, and it's still possible this could attain Category 5 status before it makes landfall. We have to see if this experiences maybe an eyewall replacement cycle, or maybe the wind shear that's still a little bit that's still towards Texas and Louisiana weakens it just before it makes landfall, which will definitely be very fortunate. However, whether this is a Cat 4, whether this is a Cat 5, or maybe even as low as Cat 3, prepare as if your life is on the line along the coast, because it is life-threatening storm surge I'm talking about here. 15 to 20 feet. That's just insane storm surge, guys, and definitely prepare for that. Whether this is a Category 3, Category 4, Category 5, there's still going to be a major event all throughout Texas. So definitely prepare for that right now. In terms of the timing of this, I would say that you'll begin to experience impacts during the afternoon. The first squall lines will begin to approach the Louisiana and Texas coast, and then I would say by very early on Thursday, or maybe very late on Wednesday, we will see a landfall right around 1 a.m. I would say, and that's when you should experience the worst impacts along the Texas and Louisiana coast. So definitely prepare and evacuate if you're in a flood zone, because there's life-threatening flooding we'll be talking about. So stay safe, guys, and I hope you guys take precaution and have a good day if you're along the coast.